there's a lot of people out there that are obsessed with trying to have the perfect morning routine. But if you've got ADHD and you've ever tried to follow a perfect morning routine and given up after just a couple of days, then I'm here to tell you that it's not your fault. People with ADHD are not really suitable for just having a very rigid routine. And most routines are built for neurotypical brains, whereas brains with ADHD need more novelty, flexibility, and dopamine. And a lot of how successful your efficiency in your work and your morning routine comes down to your ability to control your dopamine and control your emotions. So you can't always follow a rigid routine if you're not feeling in a good place at the time. So sometimes when you wake up, you won't necessarily be in the mood to jump straight into work. You might want to go outside for a walk, or get some sunlight, maybe have some breakfast, an early breakfast, or go out to a coffee shop and then write a to-do list. But what I would suggest is, if you don't feel super good on that particular morning, then try to start with easy tasks like things like to-do lists, checking your emails. These kind of tasks, they don't really require much executive function, and they can give you a small hit of dopamine, because as you achieve these easier, smaller tasks, your mind is gonna be more willing to take on the bigger tasks for the day. So today I'm gonna show you how to build ADHD-friendly routines that actually stick, even if your energy levels change throughout the day or are changing between days. You might have some days where you're super low energy, for example. So to start off this topic, the first chapter that I'm going to talk about is called Why Most Morning Routines Don't Stick. So if you have an over-structured routine, it can lead to instant failure for ADHD brains. So for example, are you someone that has ADHD? So listen to this. If I told you this is what you need to do every day, just wake up, meditate for 5 minutes, write down 3 pages of notes or to-dos for the day, like literally within a few minutes of waking up, and then do some breath work, have a cold shower, right? And then if I said, if you don't do this, your day is going to be messed up, I think you're going to start to feel anxiety. Like even me just saying that, a lot of people might start to feel anxiety about it. That's before you even consider doing it. But people with neurotypical brains, as long as they don't have other kinds of mental conditions, they're usually okay to be able to do a rigid routine, and they might even prefer a rigid routine that is more disciplined. Whereas with ADHD, I think a lot of people need to consider focusing on dopamine and flexibility. So when I say dopamine and flexibility, don't beat yourself up if you haven't been able to start on the important tasks within the first couple of hours of the day. Of course, you should always aim to do that, because that's when your energy is at its best and you're least distracted. But you can tackle tasks at any point during the day, and even if you have to tackle tasks later on, and cut them into smaller pieces, smaller segments. So I discussed this in one of my other videos. If you have a really big task that feels like climbing a mountain, just cut it into chapters or segments, and then make a to-do list, and then just have the main task and the subtasks, and this way you're gonna have less anxiety, you're gonna have better dopamine control, and you're gonna have more flexibility. You could do one task, then you could take a break, and then move back to the next one. So you're gonna have a variability in your energy and your mood throughout the day. So this is why you might need to take breaks, right? When your energy is getting low or your dopamine is getting too low, you might want to consider just having maybe going and doing some meditation, or doing something that doesn't require so much cognitive power. Maybe take a break and just scroll on social media for a few minutes, right? People say that it's unhealthy to do those kind of things, but I think that if you're disciplined and you just control your social media time, it can be a good way to just take a break from your working day and just have like a downtime. Or if you're not into that, just go lie down on the sofa, lie down in your bed. As I've mentioned, some meditation. There's a lot of things you can do. You could have a ritual where you're going to go and make a cup of lemon and honey tea, right? And that could be your ritual. Or it could be matcha tea, and then that's going to wake you up a little bit, and it's going to give you a chance to have a break from thinking. Because a lot of people with ADHD, they kind of get hyper focused, and they'll think very, very hard for a period of time, like say 5-10 minutes or even an hour, and then they're going to be so burned out by the end of that period, they're going to kind of mess up their productivity for the rest of the day. So you really need to be careful about how long these sprints are. Maybe try to control the length of these sprints that you're doing. So executive dysfunction is another issue I'm going to talk about. So let me just go through some of the issues. So the four major ones are variability in your energy and mood, executive dysfunction, decision overload, and time blindness. So we've already discussed variability in energy and mood. So let's talk about executive dysfunction. So executive dysfunction is when you might feel like you know what you need to do, but you can't get yourself to start, so you procrastinate. So as an example, you might be sitting on the sofa and you'd be fully aware that you need to get up, maybe go take a shower. Maybe you wake up in the morning and you're like, okay, I need to take a shower and I need to go to work, but you just don't have the energy, or you're just not in the mood. You're like I really don't want to go to work today. Or maybe you're working home, I don't feel like starting work. So you need to manage your emotions in these kinds of times. So if you can have more flexibility, and for example, just think, okay, well, I don't need to go to work today yet, maybe I can go a little bit later, and focus on something else that you can do for the next 10 minutes, like one of your rituals. Maybe have a list of rituals. So you're gonna go make a cup of tea, maybe you're gonna do some meditation, whatever it is, or just focus on one thing at a time. Focus on the shower, because the shower is not gonna give you too much anxiety. It's a relatively simple task, right? And then try not to overload your mind with all of the tasks and to-dos for the day. So going on to the third factor, which is decision overload. Like, if you have too many choices, you're going to find it difficult to know which choice to go for. So a lot of people say this, a lot of neurotypical people say this, and I think it kind of applies to people with ADHD too, and that is, try to make it as easy as possible to be productive. So sometimes what I like to do is, if I'm having a super bad mood or energy day, then maybe I'll try to improve it by going out to a coffee shop, maybe having a cup of tea or coffee, getting some sunlight, some sunshine, and then just trying to relax. And then when I get back home, I know I need to do some work, but if I still don't feel like doing some work, all I'm gonna do is just sit in front of my computer and I'm gonna think about what is the easiest thing that I can do right now, right? Maybe that's setting up my environment, my work environment, and I'll do that. And then instead of focusing on one complete task, I'll just think, well, I'll start on the first subtask of this overall, long, cool task. And it doesn't matter if I mess it up because it's only going to take me a few minutes. So if I mess it up, I can just redo it, right? So try to give yourself less anxiety by focusing less on your performance, if that makes sense, and focus more on your just ability to endure the moment of just going through the process. Maybe just try to enjoy the process. So this is a dopamine problem, right? Your brain's telling you, like, I'm not going to enjoy this process unless I get it successfully done in one take, and then I'll get that dopamine hit. But this is wrong. Like, if you can try to train your brain to enjoy the process of whatever work or task you're doing, then you can get a dopamine hit just from trying it without necessarily having to get it right and then get that extra dopamine from doing it successfully. So try to untrain from that. And that's kind of a way of becoming more disciplined. Like, if your thinking process becomes more disciplined when you can detach the need for success from your ability to get dopamine. And I think this is true in many areas of your life. So this could be true not only for your work productivity, but also for your social life, for your dating life, for your investments, right? All kinds of areas of your life. If your ability to be happy is too connected to certain outcomes, it's very easy to become depressed because things can go wrong in your life. So you're gonna have a lot of risk of depression if you have that mindset. So another example of decision overload is, let's say you wake up in the morning and you open your wardrobe and then you see 10 shirts, 5 pants, and 3 pairs of shoes. So you're not able to quickly decide what you want to wear, and then you're going to get some kind of mental exhaustion just from thinking about picking whatever it is that you're going to wear for the day. And that sounds ridiculous to neurotypical people, but this is very common with people that have ADHD. And you can even, if it's a more emotional subject, your brain can even go into like a loop or a cycle where you're hyper-focused and overthinking many kind of areas of your life. This is not going to happen for choosing clothes, right? But it can happen for things to do with your work or your relationships, and it all comes down to ADHD's effect on decision making and executive function. So one of the things that I try to limit in my life, and this might sound kind of strange, but I try to not drive too much, especially in the morning. Like, if I know that I want to have a productive day, I don't want to go out and drive 30-40 minutes to some place and then come back, because all of that driving, like, there's a lot of decision making when you're driving, and even if you're a good driver, it doesn't really matter because you're still gonna cause some level of mental energy usage for that process, and that's not a small thing, right? If you have this condition, and if you're normal, then you don't really need to worry about it. But I mean, I can tell you, like, if I've ever done a job, so I worked a job when I was young, when I've had to do something like customer facing, you know, when you have to do all kinds of decisions, all kinds of movements, all kinds of conversations, right? I wouldn't be able to work a customer support job on the phone because that would just be so exhausting. It's these kind of things, like the more things that you need to decide and think about, the more exhaustion you're going to have. And my theory about this is it's going to be harder to take on those difficult tasks and thought processes if you're already getting mentally exhausted from lots of small decisions and tasks. So just something that I want to throw out there, something to think about. Alright, so moving on to the last topic in our list, which is time blindness. So time blindness is basically you don't know how long you're doing some kind of task, and it can be great. Like if you're working on something and you're not aware of how long it's taking you, then it can be a good thing because that means you're productive for longer periods of time, right? But if you're just scrolling on Instagram, or you're watching a YouTube video, or you're watching Netflix, you're doing something unproductive. And if you have time blindness doing these kind of things, it can set you up to potentially ruin the rest of your day because you might waste 1 or 2 hours doing something because it was giving you a dopamine hit and your brain's getting addicted to whatever that addictive behavior is. So then you don't even check the time. This is something that you really need to be aware of because addictive behavior and dopamine control and time blindness, these are all symptoms of ADHD and some other conditions, but we're talking about ADHD today. So this is why you need to really kind of be aware of how long you spend doing various things. So I'm not saying that you should follow like a super rigid schedule, but I would just maybe consider using timers, like, oh, I'm going to take a break from this and I'm going to time myself to see how long it takes. So if you try to follow like a super rigid schedule with ADHD, you might give yourself a lot of anxiety, like if you have really bad ADHD. So you can try to give yourself some soft pointers or pushes in the right direction without necessarily going overboard. And neurotypical people are going to laugh when they hear this. They're going to think like, well, I have a schedule and it has like 20 things per day and I can follow it to the letter. But I wouldn't compare yourself to these people and just, you know, create a strategy, create a symptom management strategy that works for you. And then that's all you need to worry about. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Don't worry about what works for other people. Just try to find what works for you. And you're not lazy, you know, you're not broken. Your brain just works differently to other people. So that's it. So those 4 things are things that you can be aware of, you know, that you can improve your ability to manage. So now we can move on to the next chapter of this video, which is, I like to call it the dopamine-first principle. And I'm not going to spend too long on this because we've already really discussed it over this video. But as I mentioned, ADHD brains are dopamine starved in the morning. So you might wake up and your battery is at 5% because you just don't have that good feeling, that happy feeling that dopamine gives you, and you might not feel like doing anything, especially if you don't get a good sleep. So getting a good sleep is probably the number one thing that you can do to improve this. But if you're already in a position where you're not feeling it, the best you can do is manage it. So try to start your day with something stimulating before attempting to do anything productive. So maybe put on some relaxing music, or maybe have a cold shower if that's what you're into. Go for a walk perhaps. So you could think of some kind of easy small morning routines that are going to give you a quick reward, a quick hit of dopamine. So I think that's all we need to talk about for the dopamine, because we've really been going over it so much. So moving on to the third chapter of this video, I'll call this one avoiding decision fatigue. So we've already talked about this a lot too, so I'll probably make this one fast as well. So decision overload is when you have too many choices. So the way that you can reduce your number of choices is by putting some kind of planning into your life. So you don't need a super rigid schedule, but you can have some kind of idea about what you want to do for that day, what you're going to eat, what you're going to wear. So for me, to not get into this situation, I'll literally just open my wardrobe and I'll just pick anything that looks good for that day in terms of clothing, unless I have some really special occasion to kind of go into. And that's the thing. So try not to overthink. Some things you don't need to really overthink or have anxiety over, because they're so simple, if that makes sense. And try to be pre-committed to your routines. So you don't have to follow them religiously, but you could have 2 or 3 alternative routines that you follow. So let's say routine A is like the absolute most efficient routine that you can think of. You wake up, you have a shower, you get an hour's work done, then maybe have a cup of coffee and some breakfast. So that's the absolute number one routine for your issue or your symptoms. But if your energy levels are low, or you're feeling depressed, you're not feeling the dopamine, you might want to not work for that first hour and just chill. If you can, if you're lucky enough to not be on a set schedule, then you could just try to relax, do some meditation, maybe just do some simple tasks like I mentioned earlier, something like a to-do list, checking your emails. So we're not going to spend too much time on that topic because we kind of discussed it. So going on to the next chapter. So chapter 4, I call this one ADHD-friendly morning routines by energy level. So these are different kind of choices that you can have. So for a low energy day routine, when you feel like you want to die, but you still need to get something done, start the day with a dopamine kickstarter. For example, play some upbeat music, maybe play some relaxing jazz or classical music, if that's what you're into. It's probably better if you just get out of bed though. Regardless of how bad your day is going, I always recommend you get out of bed and then do whatever it is you're going to do in another room, because then you can really kind of help your brain to wake up by not just lying in bed. And then you have to consider things that can improve the situation slightly. So try to eat a nutritious breakfast. And sometimes I like to fast in the morning because it's a good way to kind of burn body fat and be healthier in some ways. But if I'm having a really low dopamine day, I really just want to get some food, get some nutrition, and have like a slightly enjoyable breakfast. So you need to it's really damage control at this point. So you're not focused on trying to be slim or trying to get as much work done as you can, but you're focused on, okay, let's survive the day. Like, what is the best steps I can take to make myself a little bit happier in the next couple of hours so that I can be more productive? So maybe do these things and then write down one goal, one task that you're going to accomplish after this kind of recess period when you're kind of building up your dopamine for the day. Then, so that's the first option, right? That's the low energy day. Then what about like a medium energy day? So a medium energy day might start with waking up, having a quick shower, and then maybe making a coffee or tea, and then just going straight into work. So writing down your to-do list, writing down your priorities, maybe even make out a time block for your first task. If the first task is very long, just kind of crank out some effort into it. Just do some of the task, get it started, work on it for 20-30 minutes and then take a break. But you've got some energy there, so don't waste it. Don't waste your medium energy days by going out and using up the energy, using it up for distractions. So you can still be super productive on a medium energy day. So like today is a medium energy day for me and I'm here making this video. There you go. What about a high energy day routine? So let's say you wake up like a lion and you're ready to, chase the day. You're really feeling it. You can take on the world. You're gonna run for president, whatever it is, right? So then you probably want to start the day with something that you hate to do on the low energy days. Maybe on the medium energy days, you're still going to find this super tough. So my advice for this, what I would like to do personally, you don't have to do this, but I would go do some exercise. So I'm lucky enough to have a gym, so I'll head to the gym. Maybe I'll do 20 minutes on the elliptical or 20 minutes of jogging on the the exercise machines, the treadmill, right? So that's really good for building up your cardio, building up your cardiovascular health. Then maybe you could go take a shower, and then you'll have that hit of dopamine from the exercise. So your energy is not going to be used up and you've got something healthy, a healthy start to the day. You might want to have a nice protein-rich breakfast to, recover those amino acids after you exercise. Then your energy is still going to be high at this point. So I would think of the hardest task that you can do for that day and start working on it first thing. You might need to break it up into subtasks, but just go at it, because these high energy days, for some people it might only be one day a week. You want to try to get as much high energy days as you can, but I'll be talking about this in another video. I have tips and tricks that I can give you to improve the number of high energy days that you have. But when you have them for now, like really just utilize it and try to make a plan that's so ambitious that you might think like, oh, I'm not going to accomplish this, right? This is quite a lot of work, but just write it down, right? Worst case scenario, you try at it and you get 70% done, and that might still be way more productivity than you have on a medium energy day, for example, or you could 10x a low energy day if you do that. So moving on to the next chapter, let's talk about some tips and tricks you can use to help you. So I like to use sticky notes to kind of remind me of what I need to do. If you have the space, you could get a whiteboard and then you could just write down some to-do lists, write down some notes, maybe a diagram, maybe a mind map or something that's going to kind of give you some extra space to store, like an external memory space. That I often recommend people with ADHD, like you don't have a lot of short-term memory space compared to neurotypical people, so you could externalize that short-term memory. If you go really into it, you could even have like a whole book or journal where you chapter it. You can have 3 or 4 chapters with different topics. So one topic could be, all right, this is my short-term memory for work for this day, and this is my short-term memory for my nutrition and my meal plan for this day, right? So you really can improve your ability to manage multiple aspects of your life by finding some kind of hacks or tricks that give you that same advantage that neurotypical people have. Externalize your short-term memory requirement. So you could use sticky notes, whiteboards, color-coded checklists. Try to write more things down and try to keep, to-do lists, task lists, and try to track your progress. So one thing with ADHD is we're so focused on what we're doing in the moment that it can be difficult to know how much progress we're making, because we tend to hyper focus on one thing at a time. So by doing this, you can offload some of that mental pressure or requirements that might overload you by having these systems in place. So it's kind of like a performance system in a way. Other things that you could do, you might have a morning routine that ties into this kind of note-taking or to-do list, or you have systems for different things, whether it's your nutrition or your work, and then you could separate a plan for each one. So even though it's difficult to be disciplined, it's difficult to follow routines with ADHD, but if you at least make some effort, I think that a flexible routine is still possible. And another thing you might want to try is using timers. So the Pomodoro technique is very popular. You work for a 25-minute block, then you take a 5-minute break, and that kind of lets your energy levels reset. It gives you time to relax, maybe meditate, maybe close your eyes and just try to recover your mental energy, and that's going to give you a bigger energy reserve for the next working block that you try to accomplish or finish. And it doesn't have to be 25 minutes, so it depends on your energy. It could be 30 minutes, could be 40 minutes, could even be longer, right? It just depends how well you manage for that day. So try to be aware of the time. You don't want to get stuck into the topic we discussed earlier, where you're just, you're not aware of how long things take because of the hyper-focus issue. So if you use time as, if you have some kind of schedule, you're going to help with this issue. Another thing that you might want to consider is automating some of your decisions. So, for example, do you take ADHD medication? Maybe have an alarm set so it's going to remind you to take it at a certain time in the day. I just take mine first thing in the morning, so I don't really need a reminder. But if you can make some kind of ritual for some of the tasks that you have, it's going to really lower the decision fatigue that you're gonna feel. So just to summarize today's video, your ADHD routine doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be reliable, flexible, and dopamine friendly. So what I would do is focus on your dopamine first, and then focus on lowering the number of decisions that you need, the number of steps that you need to take to have a productive day and do productive tasks. So that's going to lower your decision fatigue. And then step 3, tailor your tasks for the day based on your energy levels for that day. So if you follow these 3 principles and the other tips I've given you on this video, you're going to start your journey on having a better morning routine. So thank you for watching. Please drop a comment and tell me, what's your go-to ADHD morning hack? I want to know. Tell me in the comments and I'll definitely reply to you. And also like and subscribe to my video, and I'll see you the next one with more tips. Thank you for watching. Bye.